Now, let's move on to Representative Norris, who has our first bill on the agenda, House File 4117. Welcome back to the committee, Representative Norris. Once you get settled, go ahead and, let's see, I will move House File 4117 before the committee because I always love a good discussion around local operating revenue and equalization. So with that, Representative Norris, go ahead and present your bill.
Thank you, Chair Joachim and members of the committee. House File 4117 aims to further the state's investment in our public school students and educators while bringing more parity to school district funding across the state. The bill has several features. It increases the local option revenue amount by approximately $200 per pupil, a figure that hasn't been adjusted since it was established in 2014. It establishes a cost-based reimbursement for a school's unemployment insurance costs and paid family medical leave expenses. And it reduces disparities among school districts with varying property tax bases by increasing the equalization factor for both local option revenue and the operating referendum, meaning more assistance to low tax-based districts. I have two testifiers joining me today who will share more about the benefits of increasing state aid to our schools and increasing property tax fairness across districts.
Thank you. With that, first testifier, go ahead and state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Scott Cronquist with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. And thank you for the opportunity to make a few brief remarks in support of House File 4117. I want to thank Representative Norris for carrying this important bill that would significantly enhance the stability of our education funding system. Last session, Madam Chair and members, you all approved a tremendous investment in our schools and made significant progress towards stabilizing the funding system, specifically linking the formula to inflation, reducing the cross subsidies in special ed and English learner, and allowing locally elected school boards to renew an existing referendum were a tremendous help in bringing greater stability. House File 4117 would bring further stability and greater equity to the funding system. Local optional revenue is an important funding stream, providing just over 6% of general education revenue on a statewide basis. However, as Representative Norris noted, it has been frozen at the same level since it was enacted about a decade ago. Likewise, the equalizing factors for LOR and operating referendum have been badly eroded by inflation over the years. On a statewide basis, referendum revenue and local optional revenue comprise 15% of general education revenue for school districts. For some districts, that number is significantly higher than that and is even more important for their general fund. House File 4117 would make great strides towards stabilizing these two important funding streams. I'll stop there and leave it to the two following testifiers to share a little bit more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kernquist. And with that, maybe Mr. Strom, can you just briefly go over the runs that are in our packets? Just describe them, please.
Madam Chair, members, there's a printout on legal page turned sideways for you that shows a couple of things, including the impact of House File 4117 using the February 24 forecast estimates for fiscal 26, which is the 2025-26 school year. This printout's organized like many of those you see in the committee with the strata grouped at the top and then individual districts listed in district number order following. The pupil count is in the first column, then the referendum market value, which is the tax base that's used to equalize the referendum, and that tax base divided by the resident pupil units then gives the tax base per pupil column, and that column you can see there in the second column of up and down the list, you can see the average district's tax base per pupil of referendum market value is $905,398. And then it gets into the calculations of the existing formula and then the proposed change. So under baseline for fiscal year 26, it's estimated that local optional revenue will total $616 million. About 90% of that's paid through the local levy, and 10% comes through the equalization aid, which is, as the tax base keeps growing, provides less support each year. Then the next column over shows the existing UI summer aid based on the 24 estimates that this committee discussed yesterday, as well as about $8 million of unemployment insurance levy that school districts did in Pay 24 based on the levy for their permanent layoffs, which is ongoing authority they've had for a number of years. The total of those two is about $47 million. So the combination of those two programs is about $664 million. The alternative that's proposed in Representative Norris's bill is to increase that general allowance for local optional revenue from $724 to $920 and then adjust for inflation. So you can see that that pushes that amount up to $784 million. Adding in then the UI to that amount adds another $47 million for a total of $831 million. That's a $167 million increase in revenue shown in the next column, and you can see that for this year that revenue increase is essentially a fixed amount because the UI estimate is the same used in 26 as was for the 24 year, $196 per pupil of additional money. Then the next two columns are for information only at this point in time. We don't yet have a good way of estimating the paid family and medical leave costs that districts are going to face. Others may want to address this. The business manager that's here today may have a thought how his district will shake out on this. As members may know, that bill passed last year and employees could face a tax rate of 0.3%, 0.4%, or 0.7% depending on the programs they have and if they have qualifying programs for their employees. Otherwise, they wouldn't face an additional rate. So as a way of providing information for you, I've used a 0.3% rate against the payroll for each district to show what kind of fiscal implication that would have for the district. And that component, as Representative Norris said, is going to be added to the formula. It's a reimbursement basis, so it wouldn't show up until fiscal year 27 at its first year, but just so members have a sense of how much that would be. Then on the perpetual issue, we get in this committee about how to do equalization. Often these bills are drafted before we know what the forecast information is going to be, so we try to back into an equalizing factor. The goal with this bill and others that have been introduced on local optional revenue have been to keep the property taxes at the same level statewide. The equalizing factor under the existing program is set at $880,000 for the first tier and about $600,000 depending on the year for the second tier of LOR. Combining those into a single equalizing factor to fund the proposed program in House File 4117 requires an equalizing factor of $1,245,000 if it were all done on LOR and not split between local optional revenue and the referendum. I think the author's goal is to split that between the two, but for purposes of getting this all on one printout, it shows the effect of keeping the property taxes the same statewide. So the last three columns on the printout then say choose a $300,000 property, and remember this is referendum market value, so it doesn't have the class rates involved, and you can see statewide those amounts are the same. $300,000 house in Black Duck or Wayzata or wherever is going to pay the same amount of tax based on the overall tax base. The state average is $205, but depending on the composition of the rest of the tax base, the more property wealthy districts will have a lower rate, and you can look up and down those rates there to see where the rate is under current law and where it goes with the new equalizing factor and the higher revenue amount. And again, that second column from the left, if you go all the way back to the left, that's sort of the magic number for equalization. That's the individual tax base per pupil that's going to be set over that equalizing factor. So I apologize for the relatively long explanation, but there's a lot of material on this printout, and just want members to understand what each of these columns represent.
Mr. Strom, I just wanted to make sure I caught it too in the bill. So instead of going to the average net tax capacity of the individual district, how our first and second tier do for LOR, it moves it to the statewide average that goes up for inflation?
Madam Chair, no, it changes the equalizing factor. Both are still based on referendum market value, but it pushes
Okay.
that equalizing factor up to a higher level so that the same amount of local levy is incurred statewide. They're shifting amongst districts. In general, the lower tax-based districts are going to be getting more state aid, while some of the highest tax-based districts are going to get an increase in their individual levy.
Yes, and then it collapses both the tiers, Mr. Strom?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bennett, you have a question for
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Strom?
Chair. I do have a question for Mr. Strom. And Mr. Strom, the other day I was asking you to read my mind, and today I'm going to probably ask you a question that has no answer, but I'll try anyway. And obviously, all this is so complicated, and there's different, not for you, but for me. So here's my question. If a school district used their local option revenue levied up to the full amount that they are able to do, throughout the state, all the school districts, what's the range of equalization? And I know it's different for every district, but could you tell me, like, some districts will get 10% equalization and others will get 90% of that cost? Or, did you get my question? I'm not sure if I'm making it clear.
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative
a
Bennett,
range?
that's a really good question. I sort of ran out of columns on this printout. On the spreadsheet itself, though, if we take one of the districts, I believe in your area is the Alden-Conger School District, District 242. They're very low tax base, relatively low tax base per pupil, as is Albert Lee. Maybe we just use Albert Lee for convenience. District 241. And you can see that under the current, or under the equalizing factor for them, it's about $494,000 per pupil, which is less than, or is about half the state average. So under current law on the aid levy split for that district, under current law, there's $2.5 million of revenue, and 1.7 million of that comes from levy versus 800,000 from the state aid. So about a third is state aid in a relatively property poor district like Albert Lee. Not to pick on anyone's district, but just because it's real close by. If you go down to Red Wing, just a few districts down, the Red Wing School District has $1.1 million of tax base per kid, quite a bit higher than Albert Lee's. And if you look at the same mix there, out of their $1.8 million of revenue under current law, that full amount comes from the local levy because their tax base per pupil is over the equalizing factor. So the tax base per pupil is really that measure that counts, and the range of revenue of state aid as a portion of that revenue varies as well, depending on the district's tax base. As I said, statewide, it's about 10%, but for districts more situated like Albert Lee, it's about 30%. For districts situated like Red Wing or some of the suburban districts, it's 0% aid and all levy.
Representative Bennett,
Yeah,
follow-up?
and thank you, Mr. Strom. You should really be a teacher. You did a good job with that. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Bennett, we're not allowing him to retire at any time. Thank you, Mr. Strom. And with that, we'll go to our first testifier. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Chair Joachim, committee members, and Representative Norris. My name is Jeff Holmberg, Superintendent with Centennial Schools. I'm here to testify in support of House File 4117. I'm representing the Centennial Schools community, which includes Blaine, Centerville, Circle Pines, Lexington, and Lino Lakes, as well as two partner organizations, the Association of Metropolitan School District, AMSD, and Schools for Equity in Education, SEED. We support the proposal to increase the local optional revenue formula. LOR has remained stagnant for the past 10 years since its inception, and we advocate for the increase to $920. The bill also links local optional revenue to the formula to prevent erosion to inflation in the future. We strongly advocate for aligning future LOR calculations with inflation to provide a consistent and indexed approach that would bring stability and predictability to our budgeting process. Since our community is predominantly residential, tax relief is our top priority. And this bill promotes greater property tax fairness by increasing the equalizing factor for both local optional revenue and operating referendum, and equalization is paramount to our district. So we support any measure to reduce the property tax burden on our taxpayers. Secondly, this bill has several important provisions. This bill allows school districts to use local optional revenue to be reimbursed for costs for unemployment insurance and paid family medical leave. Temporary funding for unemployment insurance costs has been provided, but it will be an unfunded mandate when the funding runs out. As an example, this past summer, unemployment insurance costs for our district surpassed $300,000. And we anticipate a further increase in the upcoming summer of 2025. There is currently no identified funding stream for paid family medical leave, so school districts will have to use general fund dollars revenue in order to cover that cost when the program goes into effect. A sustainable funding mechanism is crucial to ensure continued success of these programs without placing an undue burden on our budget. We extend our gratitude for your commitment to addressing these vital issues and look forward to the future of this legislation's positive impact on school districts and communities. Thank you, Representative Norris, for authoring this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Superintendent. With that, next up is Director of Finance and Operations at Minnetonka Public Schools, Paul Burgoyes, which you will have to pronounce for me. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Chair Yukim, it's Paul Bourgeois with Minnetonka Public Schools. I'm here testifying on behalf of also AMSD and MASBO and MREA. And thank you, Representative Norris. The testifiers have talked a little bit about property tax equalization and that measure, so I'm just going to talk more about why this is really important to every school district in the state. And I'm going to use a metaphor. I wore my battleship tie today because our school districts are kind of like, they're Minnesota's fleet. We're the fleet that kind of fights the battle against not being educated, against time. We have 13 years for each of these students to come through our systems. And we have to do the best we can. We're battling every day to take every student up to as high a level of learning as they can go to, so they can get achieve their best aspirations. But no money, no mission. But we're steaming along out there, but we're taking some hits. And inflation is just a torpedo that just is hitting us. It's hitting everybody. The mandates in these are a couple more torpedoes in the water that are going to hit us. And as previously stated, it'll reduce the amount of money available to spend on our students. And again, there's good reason for those mandates. So we're not saying that they're not appropriate. But the thing is we really need you to figure out a way to help us fund them. The $196 is, I'm going to mix in another metaphor. The $196 is going to be like a man in the desert stumbling upon an oasis. Right now, the MSD districts are at cumulative $317 million of budget reductions. And that's probably because of inflation. I mean, we're having to take care of our employee groups because they're actually getting just hammered. And every school district's general operating fund budget is 75 to 85% salaries and benefits of the staff that actually help these students become the best they can be. The reason we have $920 in there, if you take the original tier of the $424 from July of 2014 when we first got it, utilizing the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, that'd be worth about $552 right now. Through February with the latest in statistics that they just published for the CPI. And then the inflation calculator from July of 2020 for the $300 tier, that would be worth about $359. So you're talking about $911, and when we're proposing this, it's like by the time we get these funds, there'll be additional inflation because we won't get them until July of 2025. So we thought $920. It's a nice round number in that regard, but it's also reflecting there'll be additional inflation between now and then. So again, this is really important money. It's going to be important to every single school district in the state if you can find a way to do it. I know there's going to be a tough budget biennium next year. if you can find a way to fund this, it'd really be received by a bunch of grateful school boards and school district personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Finance Director. With that, I believe we can go to member questions. Lee Kunish. Oh, did I see Representative Bakeberg? Sorry, Lee Kruschel. I
it's
clearly
okay.
have not had coffee this morning. Lee,
Put me at
would
the
you
end.
mind if you go at the end? Okay, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was comical. Thank you to the testifiers. And how do you say your name again?
It's French, bourgeois.
Bourgeois. So, Mr. Bourgeois, thank you very much. Your expertise, your boots on the ground perspective is really helpful. So maybe this question could be to Mr. Bourgeois, could be to Mr. Norris, but that local option levy, can you just clarify who decides that?
Mr. Bourgeois?
Thank you, Chair Yuki. Yes, Representative Bakeberg, it's local optional. So literally, the school boards have the ability to levy anything from 0 to 724 right now. It's been that way from the initial enrollment or initial startup of it. Most of the districts are going to the top, but there have been some districts in the past when equalization was a little tighter that are not utilizing the full amount.
Representative Bakeberg, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. And I think in your testimony, you talked about some of these mandates that were passed last year. We had a conversation yesterday, but, and just for the sake of time, I'll answer my own question. But Mr. Bourgeois or the school districts or represented, they did not decide on paid family medical leave. They did not decide or advocate for unemployment insurance. What they're doing now is asking for a funding source for this, because if those two things are coming, have come or are coming, and if there's not a funding source for this, it will result in budget reductions even further than the 300 million that AMSD has talked about. So, thank you for getting creative. It's a wonderful creative idea on how we look at things. But I think this is going to, depending on equalization, this will be an increase, or could be, depending on factors at the local level, and it puts the onus on our local school boards to have to make determinations on how to fund programs that they did not ask for. So that's the tension that I see in this. So this, in my opinion, this bill is really trying to cover the new mandates that were passed by the DFL last year. It isn't new money. It is trying to cover the mandates from last year. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions before I have a few? Seeing none. I'm not sure, Representative Norris, who would be the best person, maybe Mr. Grunquist? Mr. Grunquist, I want to thank you too for the creativity around this, especially with the local optional revenue piece. I've carried a bill for that for 3 years now, just because we're stuck in older numbers and the property values have increased. And I see you left it scaled by leaving that one piece open to see how much we could cover. And increasing it to $920 hopefully will help some of our districts. And then doing the equalization factor higher will help some of our districts that can't access that equalization. I represent 3 that have 0, and it goes all on our taxpayers. So I think that's important. With the UI piece, can you tell me, I think I remember from our presentation yesterday, 1, districts haven't had to pay anything yet because we have the pot of money. But 2, what do you do for your other employers, or when you do have the employees that qualify and had qualified in the past for UI? How do you pay for that? Don't you have a levy stream that does that as well?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Yes, there is an existing unemployment levy that school districts use that are not allowed to use it for the new benefit that was passed last session. What we proposed in this bill was to repeal that existing UI levy and to use this local optional revenue option to cover all UI costs. And the thought behind that was the existing UI levy is not an equalized levy, so it's all levy for every district. And whereas the local optional revenue does have, it's still a decent equalization levy. Obviously, we're hoping in this bill to also raise that. So that was the idea behind shifting it over to the local optional revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhnquist. And can you tell me, besides the paraprofessionals, who else in your buildings qualify for UI? Under the old law?
Boy, I might have to phone a friend or turn to Mr. Strom. I mean, there's a wide variety of employee groups.
Yes,
that do that.
Mr. Stroud.
Madam Chair, the current unemployment insurance levy covers all employees if the layoff is permanent. So essentially, it doesn't have to do with what category of employee they are. It has to do with whether the termination is permanent or not. And one note about the estimation of that, and Business Manager Bourgeois or the Superintendent Holbert could speak to this, is because the districts actually don't know the amount for a couple of years, on the levy forms, they put a round number, their best guess for that year, and then it's actually 2 following levy years later before the final number gets keyed in. So there's always an adjustment 2 years after for that, because they have to estimate ahead of time how many people might they lay off during the next year and put that on the levy. So that adjustment's full 2 years out. So that current cycle for that is sort of a 3-year cycle. So just in case members are looking at the individual data and wondering why a district may say their unemployment insurance levy is $200,000, that's their best guess, rounded of course, but it's really not until 2 years later that number is finalized.
Thank you, Mr. Strom. And then one last question from me, and then I'll see if other folks have questions. Can you remind me, and I know it depends on the contracts, but there's already current employees in the school districts that have paid family and medical leave. Is that accurate? And who would they be?
Madam Chair, there are, Mr. Bourgeois might be a better option. I don't know if you have any information on that, Mr. Bourgeois. I'll turn it over to him because I might be able to give you a better answer than I can.
It's really there's not a specific designation, but there's the Federal Medical Leave Act. That's pretty much what we work with right now. So a lot of it does go unpaid. So the paid family medical leave actually is going to kind of backfill on that.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. It's my understanding, too, though, a lot of the administrators in our buildings have this in their contracts. I've heard that before, but I'll have to clarify that. So.
I'm not aware of that in any of the contracts in my district, but that doesn't mean that they're not out there in other districts.
Thank you, Mr. Bourgeois. Thank you for your patience.
Sure.
And now you all know how I felt when I got up to a school at 7:15 a.m. in the morning and found out subbing that it was a French immersion. And it took a long time for me to get that, so thank you. With that, members, any other questions before I go to Lead Krisha? Lead Krisha, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in all respect to what we do down here, there's a lot of things that can be true at the same time. I think we can all recognize that taking care of employees and helping school districts is very important, as well as the students that they serve and the families. There's no argument there. And how we get to that, there's lots of ways. So I'm not going to ask a lot of questions of you. Thank you, Representative Norris. I'm just going to make some comments. We'll do a 2.5-hour beat up on the House. No, I'm kidding. But here's what we're faced with as a finance committee. We have a spreadsheet. Mr. Strom went through it. These school districts now have liabilities. They have additional liabilities. When you look at a balance sheet, you have liabilities, you have assets, and you balance those. Because of the budget that was passed, and we had a very large surplus last year that was all spent for lots of different reasons, but it was spent. And in that bill, and I don't appreciate some of the school groups that come up, because you were in our offices railing against mandates after mandates after mandates, and you knew this was coming, and now we're here saying, well, thank you for all this. I'm not saying anything negative to the majority party of the chair. You put the bill together, but we do have groups here that were playing a thin line of, yeah, we know the mandates are coming, but we're willing to eat those in addition for this. Well, now you have this. You have unfunded, and not my words, these came from testifiers, we have unfunded down the road liabilities that are going to have to be accounted for. And the argument and the challenge that's in front of this committee and this legislature in years to come is, how many dollars are we going to take out of classrooms for other liabilities? The LOR hasn't been adjusted since, I think, 2014. I actually think this should go to the tax target. But it won't go to the tax target because the tax committee doesn't want it, because they're going to have to raise money, which means they're going to have to raise taxes. And I get it. This is fantastic in some respect. We have an equalization. But to not say this is not raising taxes on the property side is to ignore the fact that if we were to put this in the tax committee, we would have to raise taxes somewhere else. The dollars are not just printed. So again, I'm not talking about the merits, or I don't want to talk about the value of the programs we pass, but we do have assets and we do have liabilities, and this is a liability that will have to be funded. It will have to be paid for. Something like this will probably have to pass, or there's going to have to come more money. But either way, what the school districts are saying, which is very, very true, and it's a problem in front of us, is the general ed fund is not going to cover all the expenses that are out there, and more of those dollars may be coming out of classrooms. That's the position we're in down the road. And we're already hearing from the finance director and the superintendent, as I'm hearing from many, many schools, saying we just don't know what the economy is going to look like. And people are very fearful of the uncertainty that's going to come in the next budget cycle. My recommendation to this legislation is, or this legislature is, let's back off the liabilities. Let's find some more flexibility so that these schools can dig out. Because if we keep piling on, and like I said, you're probably going to have to pass an LR equalization. You're going to have to find money from somewhere. But the reality is we have to back the liabilities off. We have to give the schools some breathing room, or at the end of the day, the classrooms and that tough decision of where a dollar goes will become more and more difficult. So good luck with your bill, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Leib Kusha. And you and I agree on the one thing, that it should be in a tax bill because it is a property tax cut. Equalization should be there, but we also owe our schools some measure of stability in the fact that kids shouldn't depend on where they live and their zip code and how they're funded. And some districts don't have the tax capacity to fund at the same level. And we're lucky in Minnesota that about 80% of our aid to schools comes from all of us collectively. In some districts, in some states, it's almost all borne just by the local taxpayers. So it's a balance. You're right. It's absolutely a balance, and as is in all our decisions up here. So I do appreciate you in your comments. So thank you. Representative Norris, final comment.
Thank you, Chair Joachim. Just briefly appreciate the conversation we've had here with the committee. I think this bill is a good conversation starter. It takes us in some positive directions, increasing state support and investment in our students and our educators. It brings more parity across districts depending on their property tax base. And so I look forward to continuing that conversation with the committee in the future.
Thank you, Representative Norris, and thank you for bringing this bill forward and being willing to dig in. Equalization is not always exciting, but it is very interesting all the time.
I have an entire page of notes here from Mr. Strom yesterday, so I appreciate his efforts.
Thank you. With that, members, we will lay over House File 4117 for possible inclusion in the Education Finance Bill.